What's going on, everyone? Episode 18 of Between the Dots. This past week, we saw the Sens win 2 out of their 3 games to make it 6 out of their last 7 games. And we saw the Leafs get Austin Matthews back as well. We're going to talk that and much more here on Between the Dots. Let's go. Welcome everyone to episode 18 of Between the Dots. Joe, how you feeling this week?
I'm feeling all right. The Leafs' performance just makes my emotions go all over the place. So it's been a crazy week with them.
Yeah, your emotions are always in line with however the Leafs perform. So this week is so-so. You got Austin Matthews back though. That's got to leave you feeling optimistic.
Yeah, it's one of the bright spots this week for sure. They look good, like I've said time and time again, and then look like not the team that they're supposed to be. So it was an up and down week. How are the Sens looking?
Yeah. Sens, they won 2 out of 3 games this past week. They dropped a tough one to Edmonton on Saturday, but all in all, I mean, they've been taking a lot of steps forward the past couple weeks, and currently they're 7 points out, and they have a couple games in hand, but they got a lot of teams they got to jump. So coming up to the trade deadline, it's going to be, is it worth it to maybe bring in somebody, or should we sell a couple guys and just see where we're at kind of thing next year? So we'll see.
This is what I love, though. The teams that they're so close. Do they go for it? Do they buy? Do they sell? That's what my favorite part of the trade deadline is. We're 2 weeks out, and we still don't know who's buying and who's selling.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see what Ottawa does. We'll see what the Leafs do as well come their trade deadline day.
Yeah, there's the rumors that are all over the place. I click on every single article that I see too. So many articles that are just make no sense, but you still click on it. It starts with Patrick Kane wants to go to Toronto. You click on it and you read it and you get all fired up, and then you read the next one that says Patrick Kane doesn't want to play in Canada. They're all over the place, but I'm here for it.
You just love the rumor mill, eh?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, we'll talk about some of the rumors that we've heard too over the past week as well in this show. So first things first, we're going to get into week in, week out for the past week for the Leafs and the Sens.
So we'll start off with the Leafs for week in. They started the week Friday, February 10th with a 3-0 win in Columbus. Saturday, February 11th, a 4-3 loss on a back-to-back with Columbus at home. And then Wednesday, February 15th, a 5-2 win at home against the Chicago Blackhawks. So the first game of the week, the 3-0 win in Columbus. I ended up watching the highlights, but the Friday night game, for the most part, looked like a good team playing a team that's just not there yet. They've got a few superstars, Columbus does, but they're not a fully developed team. Obviously, adding Gaudreau in the offseason, they thought they were headed in a different direction, but they're one of the bottom teams in the NHL. So it was good to see John Tavares had 2 goals in that game. The Leafs looked solid. It was just not really much you can take from that. But then the following night, the 4-3 loss to Columbus. This was a loss that you just can't have. I've said this time and time again throughout the season is the good teams can't lose to teams that are in the bottom of the standings. It just, when it comes down to home ice at the end of the year, those few points that you'll either be missing, you'll be short of another team to hopefully get home ice, and it's just, these are losses that just can't happen. Did you happen to catch any of that game on Saturday night?
Yeah, I did, and it wrecked my parlay that I had as well too, so that was not nice. But yeah, and it's just like when you're one of those bottom teams, you know that when you are facing one of those top teams that you're just going to bring your A game even more, because you know that if you don't, that you're just going to get embarrassed. So like those bottom teams are always raising their game up. So like as one of those top teams, you just got to stay focused and be ready for those games, even if it is a back-to-back like that.
Yeah, it's just tough because, like you just said, we hear that stuff from Sheldon Keefe all the time. yeah, we weren't really ready tonight. It was one of those games that you just want to forget about. Well, how many games are we going to have that you just want to forget about? Like,
Yeah.
it can't keep happening with these teams. I mean, I bet if it was Boston or Tampa in Toronto on that Saturday night, would have been a way better game. The Leafs would have came out ready to play. But for whatever reason, the teams that are in the bottom of the league, it doesn't seem like the Leafs care as much.
Yeah, no, and just like that excuse isn't gonna, or that line isn't gonna work come playoff time either. Like, oh, we just weren't ready. Oh, well, you had 82 games in the regular season to get ready and be consistent. But yeah, tough loss that night, and not happy, like I said, that it totally trashed my parlay. So
Yeah, and that was also a start for Joseph Wall, which was tough. When you get a rookie goalie in there, you want to, obviously, he's been phenomenal in the AHL this year, and you want the team to have his back, and maybe even that's a game where they play a little more defensively sound, where you got to shut things down because you want to win for the goalie. So tough night overall for the Leafs. And then Wednesday, February 15th, they had a 5-2 win against the Chicago Blackhawks. So I was actually at this game, and any NHL game I've ever been to, no matter where the teams are in the standings, whether they're first playing the 30th team or whatever, both teams have looked very competitive. But last night, Chicago is bad. They are so bad.
and they're about to tear it down even more as well too.
I know the Leafs scored 9 seconds in. Like, it was as soon as they scored 9 seconds in, I looked at my buddy and I was like, "Uh-oh, like is this going to be one of these nights?" And that's the other thing too. I look at their players; they have so many guys. I don't have a clue who they are, and I'm obviously I'm pretty familiar with a lot of guys on every team. And just looking at their roster, it was like, "Who's this guy? Who's this guy?" Like, it's insane. Patrick Kane out there just looking like he does not want to be there. It was a rough night. The Leafs scored like 3 in the first period or 4, but one was disallowed on the offside, and it was just, honestly, for Chicago, it was lucky it was not a lot worse, because that was a rough game.
Oh yeah, big time. Unrelated, but you ever play against anybody who's in the NHL right now?
So I played in a tournament actually one year in high school hockey where Peak was in it, which was the school that McDavid went to. And we were in the semifinals, and I think we had like a 3-0 lead or something. Ended up blowing the 3-0 lead. The other team beat us and went to the finals. And Peak, the team that McDavid was on, was already in the finals. So if we ended up winning that game, that's the closest that I got to playing against McDavid. I know there's probably more too. That one really sticks out in my mind because I just remember, because I was watching games in that tournament, and honestly, his team was good. They weren't insane, but anytime they would get scored against, you would just watch their coach. He would just kick him on the back, just give him a little shove. He'd go out, and he wouldn't even score the goal. He would just set it up so the guy that he's passing to can't miss. He would have the goal so far out of the net, and the other guys just go to the front of the net, and they would all be tap ins.
So basically, the same thing he's doing today as well.
Yeah, exactly. It was insane watching him.
Nice. I just thought of that just because I played against Konechny as well as Strome, who's Dylan Strome, so the ex Blackhawk, which we were talking about the Hawks, so that's just why it made me think of that. But yeah, anyway, that's a big win for the Leafers. They got Nylander's on the score sheet, Matthews on the score sheet, Marner's on the score sheet, so the big guys getting it done. Obviously against a bottom team that you said is they're tanking hard for Bedard. So, that's obviously a nice win for the Leafs. So,
yeah, it was big to see Matthews come back too, and he scored a goal in that Wednesday night game. So it's
nice shot on the goal too.
Yeah, it's not like we had to wait a few games to hopefully see if he gets going again. Looks like he didn't skip a beat. So it's good for them moving forward. But yeah, just like I've said over and over, those losses to those basement teams, it's just, they got to stop happening if they want home ice.
Yeah, that's a good point too. So Sens this past week, they played 3 games. Their first one was on Saturday, February the 11th against the Edmonton Oilers. Anton Forsberg started in net in that one, and the Sens lost 6-3. The next one was on Monday, February the 13th, against the Calgary Flames. Mads Søgaard got the start in net for that, and the Sens ended up winning that one 4-3 in overtime. And then the last game of the week for the Sens came on Tuesday, February the 14th, against the New York Islanders. Kevin Mandolese made his first start and got the win 3-2 in the shootout.
Three different starters in 3 different games.
That's right. I made sure to point that out. So, like, those two guys too, Søgaard and Mandolese, who came in, both those guys had really good performances. Søgaard, they both had over 40 saves in their wins. So, I mean, 2 young guys, and gets me excited as a Sens fan because it's just like these are 2 super young goalies that are in our system. And I mean, Søgaard was a high pick too. He was like, I think 34th overall, so like very early in the second round, so almost a first round pick. He's like 6'7", and he's got all like the assets that you'd want in a goalie. So it's just a matter of time, and we just got to be patient with those goalies because Ottawa does have a bit of a tendency to get rid of the goalies before they actually reach their full potential. Examples like Ben Bishop, Robin Lehner as well. And then last summer too, trading away Gustafsson, and now he's doing a bit better.
It's tough with goalies too because like we've seen year over year, they take longer to mature, and you could have a goalie that looks like he's not good at all maybe when he's 21 or 22, but by the time they're 26, 27, it seems like that's when they're in their starting to get into their prime. So maybe a little bit later for them to start succeeding. So yeah, patience is key with goaltenders.
Oh yeah. I want to start with that Edmonton game on the Friday though. So like speaking of goalies, it was Anton Forsberg in net in that one, and Zach Hyman gets pushed into him by a Sens player, Hamanich, cross-check him, and he lands right on Forsberg, and Forsberg manages to tear both of his MCLs on the play, which I don't remember the last time hearing of a player where he got somebody fell on him and he tore both of his ligaments in his knees. So that's a tough one.
That's got to be like one of the most painful injuries you could have.
I couldn't imagine
both at once.
I know. Good luck rehabbing. Like seriously though, like that's gonna be like he's gonna have to put in some work to get back to where he is. So that ended up being a 6-3 loss. It was Jake Sanderson got hurt in that one as well too. So another guy goes down. That's a important part of our team, and it honestly like things didn't look too good on that like Sunday before our next game. Like we're like, okay, we just got beat down a bit by Edmonton 6-3. We just lost Sanderson, a huge part of our D. Forsberg got hurt that game, so now we're relying on 2 rookie goaltenders, and Talbot's still hurt. So it didn't look too good, but hey, Monday rolls around and we play a really solid game. You get a little lucky though in this one. It was 3-1 with like 2 minutes left, and the Sens somehow managed to score 2 goals with the empty net and tie this one up, send it to overtime, and the Sens end up winning on Tim Stützle's overtime game winner. Man, you want to talk about a guy who is just electric, is Stützle. A 4-point night that night, getting in on every single one of Ottawa's goals and like lighting it up, and he's still so young too, so it's
been a long time coming, I think, for him really to start not pulling away but really becoming a big leader on that team. I know obviously Tkachuk's the captain and he leads by example a lot of the time too, but you need a guy that's really just gonna fill up the score sheet for you. He's going to score goals. He's going to set guys up, and Stützle's really looks like he's becoming that player, so that's great to see for Ottawa. Yeah, 2 completely different players too, Tkachuk and Stützle, but they're both so important. So it was a good night for Ottawa. They get the win. It wasn't pretty, like I said, scoring too late, but they do manage to get it done. Being outshot that game as well too. Søgaard picks up the win. And then they play a back-to-back, which doesn't look good either on the schedule, right? Like, you're looking at this, you're like, okay, we don't have really, like much experience in net right now. And now we got a back-to-back against an Islanders team who just made a trade for a guy and is trying to push for playoffs. So
a tough game, but again, this one was the goalie stole the show for Ottawa. It was Kevin Mandolese, or Mando, as the Sens Army call him. His first game in net, the Mandalorian ended up with, I think, 47 saves in just a stellar 3-2 shootout win. So, and then 2 points again for Stützle this game. So just like, yeah, it was a nice win. Looking forward, they're now in a position where they're like close to the playoffs, where if you could maybe justify a trade for like a defenseman or a forward or something like that. But it's like, I don't want Ottawa to have to overspend or, rush the process or anything, and then like give up so much that now we're in a bad position next year. Like, this team, we still got to be patient. Like, we're still so young, and we didn't have Josh Norris this whole year too. So next year, imagine we set ourselves up nicely. We bring in a D-man next year. We have Norris back in the lineup. We have Ridley Gregg for a full like, everything's just kind of, it makes more sense for us to be like taking that really big jump next year, but we'll see how they finish.
So this is what I want to get your opinion on too, is so the Sens have a lot of young players like Stützle, like Norris, and they obviously, you want to keep your first round picks because you're still rebuilding and retooling, however you want to say it. But at what point do you decide that it's time to sell? It's time to sell those first round picks for guys like Chikrin, or I know they're probably not going to trade for a guy like Kane, but just guys that you want to go in for at the deadline. At what point do you think that that's the right move to do?
I think maybe if you're in a playoff spot, that would make more sense. Like, Ottawa, if you're doing that, like giving up a first round pick, you got to be sure what you're getting back in return. So like, for example, don't go out and trade a first round pick for Gavrikov from Columbus, because he's already said he's going to test free agency this summer. So you straight up know he's a rental, and it wouldn't make sense to give up a high round pick for a guy like that. But if you make a deal for a guy like Dumba and you convince him to re-sign at the end of the year, then maybe that makes more sense. But again, you don't want to rush giving away those first round picks just because like that pick still could be a top 10 pick this year, realistically. So like, don't give it away from this year. Maybe you give a first for next year away and see what happens. Depends on where we are, but definitely just don't rush it. And you also got to be mindful too of, like, it's all nice. Like, we got a nice young team. We still have a little bit of cap space. But if we rush the process and go out and get a guy like Mackenzie Weegar, even for example, who's got 8 years, $6.25 million per year left on his contract, if we go out and get a guy like that, that just takes away $6 million from a guy like Sanderson, or a guy like, maybe Pinto down the road, or somebody who we're going to have to renegotiate in like 1 or 2 years time. So they can't go out just make trades willy-nilly. They got to be mindful of who they're bringing in, dollar in, dollar out kind of situation.
Yeah, it's a tough position to be in. A good position, obviously, because it's, you're getting better at that point. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, and we'll do another trade deadline bit closer to the actual trade deadline, which is on March 3rd as well.
So the week out for the Leafs, Saturday, February 18th, the Leafs have a home game against Montreal. Montreal's really had their number this year, and it's another one of those teams that is not very good. You're at home. You have to be beating these teams. There's no excuses. You've had many games this year where you said, it was an off night. There's no more off nights. You got to get ready for the playoffs, and you have to beat these bad teams. So starting Saturday night, I hope they come out strong against Montreal, because the following night, February 19th, they are in Chicago, a team, obviously, like we just talked about, they're not good at all. Should be an easy 4 points for these two games. You can't go into the game expecting to win, because when you do that, the other team wants to beat you too. You're the Leafs. Hopefully they can come out and get 4 points. So after Sunday night in Chicago, the Leafs are in Buffalo Tuesday, February 21st. Another team that you should beat. They're obviously having a better year. They're one of those teams that potentially Ottawa would have to jump over to get into a playoff spot. So for the Sens' sake, I'm sure they would like Toronto to beat Buffalo. And yeah, they're in Buffalo, so I've been lucky enough to attend a few Leaf games in Buffalo, and honestly, there's nothing better than that. The Leaf games at home are fun, but I swear half the seats are empty because they're paid for by companies that don't even go to the game. But if you go to a game in Buffalo, that's where you see the real Leaf fans. And any night you go to a game in Buffalo, 100% there is more Leaf fans in the stands than Sabres fans. And the Sabres fans that are there are so irritated with all the Leaf fans, it makes it even more hilarious.
Yeah, Leafs fans travel well. I can relate to that, being a Sens fan, because sometimes you go to a Sens game when they play the Leafs, and it's the same deal. So, more Leafs fans than there are Sens fans. So, you guys get around.
Like I said, that's where you see the real fans, because a lot of them think like, I'm not paying $200 to sit at the top of the 300 level. They decide to go to Buffalo instead, and like the two of us know, obviously, like St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, that's obviously very close to Buffalo. So there's a lot of Leaf fans in that area where it's just as close to cross the border quickly and head over to the KeyBank Center and watch the Leafs and Sabres. So I'm looking forward to that game on Tuesday night. Like I said, we did it several times, and if you leave Niagara Falls and go to Buffalo, like you can get there in an hour. Like if the border's good, you can get there very quickly. So it's not even.
Yeah.
You're driving it in rush hour into Toronto, it's honestly easier to cross over into Buffalo and go take in a Sabres game.
Yeah. Talking about experiences crossing the border for a game, I got one for you. So, one time, do you remember the Canada versus USA World Junior game that was outdoors?
I remember, because I know you were there.
Yeah, that's right. So I was there, and I was lucky enough to catch the end, but basically cross the border, get there, get out of the car, so excited to be going into the stadium, about to watch, Canada World Juniors taking on, it was Brady Tkachuk too at the time. He wasn't even drafted yet to Ottawa. Just so excited. Snow was coming down. Great day for an outdoor game. I touch my pockets, slap my legs, my keys. I've locked them into my car. And I'm in the States too, so I don't have phone. I can't call CAA to get into the car. So at this point, we just started asking around to police officers outside the rink, being like, hey, this is our car. Can we please get into it? Help us get into it. And spent my entire first period, second period, and third period doing that. Luckily, by the middle of the third, we had gotten the car opened. A police officer was nice enough to help us. And at that point, we made our way into the rink, and I got to see overtime and the shootout of that game.
That, I couldn't even imagine. I would be so mad standing there, knowing what's going on inside. And
that's tough, yeah. And so you could hear the cheers too happening from inside, which just makes it even worse too. And it was funny. So Tkachuk ended up scoring the shootout winner for the U.S. in that one, and they ended up winning. So I did get to see that.
That's good. At least you made it in there.
Yeah, that's right. Now we'll get into the Sens week out. So the Ottawa Senators play on Friday, February the 17th against the Chicago Blackhawks. That is a home game. The Sens then play on Sunday, February 19th, another home game against the St. Louis Blues. And then their final game of the week comes on Monday, February the 20th against the Boston Bruins. And that one's going to be in Boston.
Need the Sens to come out big for that Boston game.
Yeah, so they beat Boston earlier this year. Actually, twice they've beaten Boston now this year. So, Boston hasn't lost much, but they've lost 2 to Ottawa so far this year. So Boston's going to come out looking for some revenge against the Sens. So we'll see what they can do. But, looking at the rest of the week, you got the Hawks. That needs to be a win. And you get the Blues, which could be a win too. There's more than enough time between Friday and Sunday to get yourself prepared. It's a home game, and St. Louis does play on the Saturday against Colorado, so they're going to be coming off a back-to-back. Those are 2 games that we could win and bump ourselves up in the standings, and then at that point we're getting into the last week of February, and we might only be like 3 points out of a playoff spot, which is very reasonable. We got to take care of business, though, against Chicago and St. Louis before we can start thinking about that.
For sure. And yeah, they teams like Ottawa, who they're in a position where they don't really know exactly where they're going to finish or what they're going to do. So these next few weeks are critical for them.
Mm-hmm. We'll see what happens, too, with like how the goalies hold up, too. And
yeah, you're playing well. Everything's going good. And the 2 NHL goalies get hurt. And your 2 goalies just automatically, yep, up to the NHL. And then you get 2 other guys come in. That's got to be tough sometimes, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's crazy, too, because, like, imagine you're a goalie who starts in the East Coast Hockey League for a year for a team's affiliate in the East Coast, and then that team has 3 goalie injuries happen. All of a sudden, you're up to the NHL. So you're essentially a couple injuries away from a shot at playing in the NHL if you're a goalie, which is why it's also hard for goalies to find teams sometimes, right? Because there's only 2 spots per team, but the second there's an injury, everybody's going to come calling. So that's it for week in, week out for the Sens and the Leafs. Now we'll just get into some news and updates from the NHL over the past week.
So obviously the biggest transaction this week was Tarasenko is now a New York Ranger. When I saw that trade go through, if I was a Rangers fan, I would be so excited. They were rumored for Patrick Kane, but they just looked like they pulled the trigger on Tarasenko. And I like teams like this when they go like, okay, we want to get somebody big. They try to go to Chicago, and I don't know that this happened, but I'm assuming something like this happened. They go to Chicago and say, we want Patrick Kane. And Chicago says, okay, well, this is what we want. Nope, sorry, that's too much. Go to the next team, look at the next big fish out there, Tarasenko. Their deal's good enough, and they pull the trigger. It makes it more exciting, like we talked about last week, because the salary cap. It's hard for these teams to make the trades before the deadline. But I'm happy for the Rangers and Rangers fans out there. Tarasenko also ended up scoring a goal in his first game, so that was good to see.
Playing alongside his Russian brother, Mr. Artemi Panarin. So
yeah, the Rangers are scary. They have a scary good roster.
They do look good, and they got a really good goalie too to back them, which come playoffs that can make a difference. So another kind of memento from the past week was Jamie Benn playing in his 1,000th career NHL game. Here's a question for you. Do you think Jamie Benn is a Hall of Famer?
I personally don't think so. He's obviously an unbelievably good player. I believe he won the Art Ross a few years ago. I know he won gold at the Olympics with Canada as well. Won it a couple times.
I believe so, yeah. In I think 2014 and 2010, I believe.
I don't believe he's got a Stanley Cup, though.
Nope.
Correct?
He does not have a Stanley Cup. He also has a World Junior Gold as well.
Yeah, I mean,
it's borderline. He's borderline right there because, he's got 815 points in 1,000 games. So he's not a point-per-game player, but that's usually kind of like where I gauge is if he's a point per game, then he gets in if you're a forward. But he's had a really great career, and he's like I said, he's borderline. So we'll see. But Art Ross is a big award for him being the top point scorer that year. Throw in a couple Olympic golds as well as not to mention any World Championship golds that he has, as well as that World Junior Gold. He's got a pretty nice international career in terms of the things he's won, but the no cup also.
I think a lot of these times you see the Hall of Famers have really good playoff careers. They've got several cups where they led their team in the playoffs and stuff, and I think that's a big part that he's missing. Like you said, he's a really good player, obviously, and he's a player that I'm sure every team in the NHL would love to have, but in my opinion, he's not a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question for you.
All right, let's hear it.
Do you know who is second in the league. Actually, I'll ask, who's first in the league in power play percentage? Let's see a guess.
Edmonton Oilers.
Correct. Do you know who's second?
It wouldn't be Ottawa.
It is Ottawa.
No way. Wow.
Second
good for
power
them.
play percentage in the NHL.
That's impressive. That is very impressive. I was going to say like maybe New Jersey or like Boston maybe. I don't know where Boston sits, but I knew New Jersey or Carolina too. They have a good one. I was going to say one of them. I knew Ottawa was up there in like the top 5. I didn't know they had made that jump though, which is impressive. I mean, second best power play next to a unit like McDavid and Draisaitl. Like that's got to give you hope for the future. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah, so 1 to 5, they go Edmonton, Ottawa, Tampa Bay, Los Angeles, and then Buffalo.
Buffalo, wow.
Yeah, there's a few surprises on there, but it's funny because I wasn't really looking into this until I was watching the highlights of a Sens game, and I saw them, I forget the game exactly where it was, but they were just throwing the puck around on the power play, and they ended up scoring, and I was like, wow, they actually, like, even though they're missing Norris, like, they got a pretty good power play, and I looked, and I was the same. I could not believe that they were second.
Mm-hmm. I knew they were doing well, and it's that's impressive. Imagine when they get Norris back too, then that means that somebody from the first unit gets bumped to the second too, which just like that's why we got to keep DeBrincat as well too, because like he's a part of that first power play unit, and we want to definitely keep that same unit together next year so that we can just like pick it up right where we left off.
For sure. Another thing I was looking at, so I talked about it a lot earlier, was the Leafs losing games to these teams that just aren't good, and you can't be losing to these teams because you want home ice. Here is why you want home ice if you're the Leafs. So the Boston Bruins record at home this year is 22-2-3. The second best team in the league at home, the Tampa Bay Lightning, 21-4-2.
Yeah.
If you're like, that is insane. Tampa Bay they're actually close to 500 on the road, so you'd hope that you could win those games if you're Toronto at home, and if you end up not having home ice, but those are two teams that are just, that's insane to have a record that good at home.
Yeah. And like honestly, like all jokes aside and in all seriousness, I think the Leafs have to do something at the deadline if they want to win around at this point. Like I know it's not nice hearing that maybe, but like they just they're not doing it for me. Like I still can't trust their goalies, in the playoffs. Like that's alone makes me iffy. And then their defense has been doing well this year, but it's still, they're not proven yet experience-wise in the playoffs to get it done. And then their forwards are just like lacking scoring depth right now, and so like there's just too many ifs. And like I know they've been battling injuries lately, so that's part of it too, their struggles lately. But just like all in all, when I'm looking at other teams in the East, it's they just don't stack up well. So I think they need to pull the trigger on something, and I don't know what that necessarily is. But I just think if they want to win around, they need to do something.
Yeah, it's just looking at those records, though. Is there, like, if I'm Kyle Dubas, I wonder if there's any part of him that goes like this. Obviously, I don't want this to happen, but I'm just wondering if there's any part of him that goes, okay, like Tampa and Boston are really good this year. I'm not selling my first round picks. I'm not selling them to trade for somebody and then lose in the first round.
Yeah. Exactly, because like, who's to say even if you do go out and get somebody that it's going to be enough to win? So I totally agree with you. Like, there needs to be some patience there as well, and like, your time will come. Just like keep that core together of the guys you really need, keep them there and keep them happy. Try to switch up the pieces each year until it's your year. And I know,
but that's the thing. It's been the Leafs year for 5 years.
That's the thing. You've had your chances, which is what makes it, so tough to get behind that logic again as well. But like, like the years where it was the North Division and you had to get through the North Division, the years where you had Columbus in the play-in. I mean, those years you didn't run into juggernauts. Like the other years where you ran into the Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning and the Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins, like you can't do too much about that. But I mean, we'll see what happens come playoffs. Like, and I kind of want to steer the direction this way now to kind of like a topic that's been debated recently is the playoff seeding format. So a lot of people have been saying like, oh, like get away from this division nonsense and let's go back to being 1 through 8. 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, so on, so on. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not just saying this because I'm a Leafs fan. It's got to be 1.
I know your answer. I already
100%. It's got to be 1 versus 8. You have to be rewarded if you finish second in your conference. If you're Tampa Bay and you end up finishing second in your conference, or Toronto, and you have to play a team that could potentially finish third in the conference, like that is, I know that's unlikely, but there's got to be more rewards for having a better regular season.
I agree with that logic, but here's my argument to it. So if you take a look at the NHL standings right now, the top 6 teams in the league are Eastern Conference teams, which is absurd. So we have Boston, Toronto, Tampa Bay, Carolina, New Jersey, New York, all with more than 72 points, and the team in first in the West is Dallas with 71. So literally with that whole seeding rearrangement stuff, guess what? The top 6 teams in the league are in the Eastern Conference right now. So whether you have it 1 to 8, the seeding, you're still facing an insanely good team. Another thing regarding this is if you took the team who Toronto would have faced last year, if it was 1 to 8 seeding, guess who it would have been?
Tampa Bay.
You're absolutely right. And if you did it again this year, guess who the Leafs would face if it was 1 to 8 right now? Tampa Bay.
Yeah, it would probably be Tampa Bay.
It would be Tampa Bay. So, regardless, just the way it is you're always in the playoffs. You're gonna have to face somebody who's an elite team. Like there's no weak teams in the playoffs at that point anymore. So it's like, yeah, it's a pain in the butt to get out of your division every single year, and for a while you might be facing the same opponent every single year. But it could still happen if it's 1 to 8, and I mean at this point everyone's so good that's left. Especially this year, I can't believe that the top 6 teams in the East would all be first in the West. And I also can't believe that Ottawa would be tied for a wild card spot right now in the West if they were. So, we knew this going into this year, though, how good the East was going to be, but it's beast mode right now. Those top 6 teams could all win the cup. That's how good it is.
So talk about going 1 versus 8 in each conference. All these teams they've got their conferences obviously for travel, and they play these teams more, but how crazy would it be to have, as soon as the playoffs start, you go 1 versus 16. Oh. Doesn't matter what conference you're in. So you could be playing, that would be entertaining.
That would be something. That'd be good. Here's so on the topic of getting out of the first round real quick before we move on. My question is to you is Kyle Dubas' job on the line this year if he doesn't make it out of the first round?
So this is a tough one because his contract's up after this year. So if you're Dubas, is he managing right now for his next position with another team? Do you sell your first round picks and go all out for a superstar? Because if you're not coming back next year, do you just try to go for it? And if it works, you could potentially get a new deal because you got the team to the third round or maybe the Stanley Cup final or something like that. And if it doesn't work, well, you didn't have a contract anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's tough. Is he managing for another position with another team? Or because if you're Dubas and you end up, it ends up working. You sell a first-round pick and Nyes in a trade for Meyer or Chikrin or whoever it may be. The Leafs offer you a deal and say, yeah, you got us to Stanley Cup final. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but you did a fantastic job.
If he gets the Stanley Cup final, he's back for sure.
No, that's what I'm saying. The Leafs will offer it to him, but is Dubas going to say, no, I deserved this contract before I got here, so I'm gonna go elsewhere. That's a possibility too. So I know that the Leafs would offer it to him, but is it going to be too late and him go somewhere else because he wishes he got it, or he thinks he should have got it sooner?
Yeah. Do you think they should offer it to him if they lose in the first round?
If they lose in the first round, no way.
Interesting. Like, my argument for him is just like he hasn't made any really bad moves in his time as a GM, but he hasn't made any like game-changing moves either. Like, he's tried to. Like, he tried to make that trade for Foligno, which was going to help them. He's tried to bring in, big name players like I think Muzzin a few years back as well, and like he's tried to build pieces around the core guys, and it just nothing's gotten them over the hump still. So it's like, do you blame that on Dubas, or do you still be patient with him? And like, we'll see.
It is tough, but I mean, you hear the players say it all the time when they get traded. It's a business, so no matter what you do, if you're not winning, I'm sorry, it's not good enough.
Yep. Those teams that are paying you are in the business to win, so you got to get it done at some point. So
exactly. You can make all the good moves. You can make all the good moves you want, but if those moves don't come together and get you playoff wins, then it doesn't matter.
So that wraps up our news and updates from around the league this past week. We're going to end off now with Saturday night special. All right, so for your Saturday night, we're going to give you a little 4-leg parlay. It starts at 10 o'clock with the Rangers beating the Flames.
And that's on the money line. And then we're going to go to the money line, the Sabres beating the Sharks.
And we're also going to take the under in the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Vegas Golden Knights game.
And the under in the Los Angeles Kings Arizona Coyotes game.
So get your bets in, and
it's going to be a late night Saturday night.
So that wraps up episode 18 of Between the Dots. Another fun episode here. Just wanted to say thank you again for all your support. And good week this past week for the Sens, and the Leafs got Matthews back as well. So we're looking forward to next week. What are you thinking for the Leafs?
More bad teams coming up for them. They got to win these games. You got to win them all.
We'll keep our eyes on the possible trades that could be lurking around the corner for both our teams, and make sure to like our videos, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'll see you next time on Between the Dots. Go Sens, go.
Go Leafs, go, baby.